We are still here with Dr. Gonsalves on Time to Talk, and we are going to be wrapping up in a moment, but there are a couple of other issues that we would need to speak with Dr. Gonsalves on. And still on the matter of LIAT, Dr. Gonsalves, this situation which now exists with the LIAT, what portion of the responsibility would you lay squarely at the feet of management? One of the things you mentioned was staff giving out incorrect information. Does the staff make up this information, or do they get it from somewhere incorrect and pass it on incorrect? How much of this is management responsible for?
I do not see the evidence that it is a managerial problem which requires any great surgical activity. At the root of it, as I repeat, is having planes available to do the job which they're supposed to do, to take you and I to the 22 destinations. That is the nub, that is the fundamental issue. Now, if I give you all the planes and the problems persist, well, other considerations may arise.
So come January, if people are still waiting in airports for 3 hours and 3 days, we can expect to see the shareholder governments demanding some better service for these millions of dollars that's being put into LIAT.
What I'd also like to take the opportunity to do is to repeat what Chester Humphrey, the head of the union here, what he said, the plea that he made for other shareholder governments, to come aboard. It is just not fair to have 3 governments, and now Dominica has come in an important, though still small way, to bear this burden. You know.
But Dr. Gonsalves, if you have a business and you're asking for investors to come and put money in, it should be a business that's viable.
No, with respect, you completely misunderstand air transport. Ma'am, you completely misunderstand regional air transportation.
No.
I am telling you, please.
No.
Please.
You are making an assumption
please,
that I don't
please,
understand.
you don't.
You don't know that.
That just tell me you don't understand.
No. You are making an assumption.
Let me tell you. No, let me tell you.
Assuming.
No, let me tell you why you don't understand
You
it.
don't know what I know, Dr. Gonsalves.
No, let me tell you, from that comment, let me tell you why you don't know. You don't know because air transportation inside of the Eastern Caribbean is not anything of a luxury type of investment. It is an absolute necessity for islands. When I invested the first set of money in LIAT, I went to my parliament in 2001, shortly after I was elected to office, and I told them that I'm investing in what is an insolvent company. That if LIAT did not exist, it had to be invented. And that the important thing is for us to get involved in that company, put money in it to try to make it better. And until this recent problem, we have made it better than what it was in 2001. So that the Grenada government, the St. Kitts government, the St. Lucia government, indeed the Trinidad government, because they're served by LIAT, the Guyanese government, they have a stake as countries served by LIAT to invest money in LIAT, because if they don't come in as equity partners, I say to them, put money to give market support in the way they give market support to other airlines outside of the region, because they bring passengers. LIAT brings passengers just as much as American Airline or Virgin or British Airways or any of them. So that this matter, this is why I make the point with crystal clarity. And a regional airline of this kind, this is not anything which is going to make money. This is a service which has to be provided, and we seek, if we can break even with this service, fine. But you cannot make money of this. So you can't use the same investment criteria which you would use for a hotel, a beer factory, with great respect, to use in relation to regional transport. Otherwise, you will stay here and can't go to Jamaica.
But Dr. Gonsalves, what you're telling me here, well, I must say, we did agree that we would stay away from the personal slurs.
It's not a personal slur.
Yeah,
I would not be able to go to Barbados.
When you're telling me what I don't know and what I don't understand, that's a personal slur. And we did agree that we would stay away from that. You don't know what I know. You don't know anything about what I know about regional air
all
transport.
I am saying to you,
So
in that regard, giving you a question, I am telling you, you cannot have a proper appreciation of regional air transport by framing the issue the way you framed it.
That you do not put money into a business that is not doing well? When you're looking for new investors, if you...
Well, that's the same point. We are going around in circles because you consider air transport...
Isn't it a business?
You consider air transport like any other business?
Isn't it a business?
Haven't you understood the point which I'm making?
Isn't it a business?
Have you not understood the point I'm making?
Isn't it a business?
All right. It's a simple thing if you don't understand it.
Isn't it a business?
I just explained to you
that
it is not a business like other businesses. To ask in a puerile sense, is it not a business? Of course it's a business, but it is a business of a different type. That's the point I'm making.
So it's not a business designed to make a profit?
I just tell you that a regional airline like LIAT, which is going about here, don't look for it to make any profit. I tell you, if it break even, you're doing okay.
Okay.
There are a lot of places, there are a lot of countries which subsidize their airlines. I am not calling for perpetual subsidy of airlines, though. I'm not calling for that. If the cost of LIAT was to be borne by the users of the service, it would be far more expensive than it is at the moment.
So without the subsidies, how will that work?
What?
Because you did say you're not calling for perpetual subsidy, but without the subsidy, the fares are going to be much higher. So how is that balance going to be obtained?
Well, what we try to do, frankly speaking, is to see if we can break even, if we can make a very modest profit, so be it. But the record of air transportation in the Eastern Caribbean, whether it is the state, the private sector and the state, the private sector used to run it, and they run away from it. The private sector and the state run it, the private sector get out. And look, if the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and those governments of Antigua and Barbuda and Barbados, didn't take the bull by the horn and to do what we are doing when other people were saying, no, leave Stanford to run Caribbean Star and so on. You know what would happen? We'd have been taken with Belly Mac boat to go from between Grenada to St. Vincent and St. Vincent to Barbados.
But at the end of the day, what we really need is a proper system of regional air transport.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be LIAT or Caribbean Star or CAL or anybody. What we need is just
what I want to suggest to you, ma'am, you mobilize some investors and you bring your own airline since you're so knowledgeable about it.
You know, I remember that, Doctor. I remember that. Don't, Dr. Gonsalves, can we just not, don't talk about me. This issue is not about me.
No.
So, but you're saying since I know so much about
No,
it,
but this is the point. I'm telling you.
Leave me
Since
out.
you know so much about
me
it.
out. We are.
And you have all the answers.
Don't get personal, doctor.
I am not
Don't get personal.
I am not getting
please,
personal.
Please. Let's just talk
You're a
about.
real thin-skinned woman, you know.
Let's talk about the issues. And I have a right to be. If my skin is thin, that is my right. But I say, don't try to get to me by talking about what I know or don't know. It won't work. It won't work. Okay. Right. We're looking at the issue of financing for LIAT as well, which is tight. We know that one of the areas governments have gone into, well, some governments in the region have become members of ALBA, trying to mobilize resources through that area. Now, earlier this year, we had a bipartisan legislation which was tabled in the United States where sanctions were being called for against members of ALBA. According to the US congressman and congresswoman, they say that ALBA countries should be looked at very closely for human rights violations, and there should be sanctions against these countries. Sanctions to include things like not giving leaders in these countries visas to travel to the US, financial sanctions especially to tell financial institutions not to do business in these countries. As a member of ALBA, are you concerned about this, which is happening in the US Congress?
Look, the US Congress has representatives from all sorts of districts. And in the US Congress, any number of congressmen would want to introduce this or that piece of legislation or pass this or that motion or make this or that statement. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a country, if you look at all the indices, a country of exceptional good governance standards. We have a splendid human rights record. You look in your own business of freedom of the press, I think you'd see we are rated in the Western Hemisphere number 2 or number 3. So I don't know what they're talking about. So I am not worried about a congressman who says something in his constituency or there or lay something in the house. That doesn't worry me.
No, that's not the part of it which should be worrying, if any at all. But when countries like Venezuela, which we know under Hugo Chavez, championed ALBA,
yes.
You know, all countries, I would say, who are members of ALBA are so because of the late Hugo Chavez. If these sanctions should ever be levied against Venezuela, which is one of the countries named in any form, wouldn't this have an impact on the entire construct of ALBA?
I don't understand why we get so worried about hypothetical things. There is no country in the Western Hemisphere which had more elections and free and fair elections than Venezuela under Chavez. Presidential elections, local government elections, state elections, recall, referenda, the whole bundle of them. People throughout the United States, intellectuals, the Carter Center, they go and they say, well, these elections are free and fair. In fact, they have a machinery, which is the machinery for elections, which is, I hear and I see it written that it is one of the most advanced in the world. I have never heard in Venezuela, as you had in 2000 presidential elections in America, about hanging chads and pregnant chads, and the Supreme Court has to decide that sort of a thing. I don't hear in Venezuela about people in some states trying to stop black people from voting, as happens in some districts and some states in the United States of America. This is not to say that America is not a land where you have free and fair elections. But to the extent that there are some derogations from fairness or or freeness in those elections to that extent. They're diminished. That doesn't mean to say that one or two instances of an irregularity or some administrative problem or something of the sort, that those would make the elections unfree or unfair. So I take a number of these things philosophically. I look at the comparative data. In the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, anytime we have won in free and fair elections, whether the last government was in office or during our time, and been so declared by the OAS, by the CARICOM, the Commonwealth, and our own local observers led by the Christian Council. So, and all the I welcome all the time, everybody, all these groups which come internationally to assess human rights, to assess trafficking in persons, to assess money laundering. We have in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and ask the Americans, ask the British, they will tell you, the best financial intelligence unit in the Caribbean. It is set up as a model, so that in my country, I ensure that the highest democratic standards and good governance standards are maintained. We just having a new identification card system in St. Vincent. It costs $2.5 million with the Canadian banknote company. We just have a new building renovated and so on. That exercise for the electoral office costs $7 million. And so that when a fellow in a particular area says something, the free and democratic world, representatives can talk and they can write and so on. The proof of the pudding, come to my country and see what I do.
Well, your country may not have been singled out as one of the countries to be watched, but as a member of the group, any watch, and I do believe that every one of us in this region would be impacted by any sanction which is laid against any country that we have relationships with.
Listen, my dear sister, we have to understand that in Alba, as far as St. Vincent and the Grenadines is concerned, I see a relationship of Petro-Carib and Alba. I see a relationship of benefit to our country. And I see it as an act of solidarity, and in the case of Venezuelans, the government of Venezuela, of selfless solidarity. Venezuela doesn't ask me to do something for them or to do something which I don't want to do. And we get substantial assistance through Venezuela. I mean, even a simple thing in well, I shouldn't say simple, a human thing, because we're talking about humanism. I had 2,500 people go to Cuba, financed by Venezuela, perform the operations performed by the Cubans to take care of people's eyes. Some who couldn't see could see. They brought down planes. We sent them, we came to screen them first. We sent them, they got the treatment up there free. So Cuba provided part of the assistance and Venezuela provided part of the assistance. Now this is a phenomenal thing. 2,500 people who can see properly or see better, or had the eye that couldn't see before. Now you're not going to see that, my dear sister, in any accounts, GDP. That's not taken into account because it doesn't enter the books, so to speak, but it touches people's lives directly. I know that when I have Hurricane Thomas, the first country that responded to me was Venezuela. They sent 10 tons of food, clothing, and water. They sent $9 million to help me with housing repairs. These are the things I know. I know under Petrocaribe that I get a substantial amount of resources. So too does Grenada, through Petrocaribe. And in relation to the ALBA, an important institution for me is the ALBA Bank. Over the last 3 years, 3.5 years, St. Vincent and Grenadines received $50 million US from the ALBA Bank. The 2% interest for 20 years. I mean,
But
it is when you get a money like that, it is practically a grant. The grant component in that is over 80%.
Venezuela right now is said to be going through very difficult economic stress. How much longer can the ALBA arrangement and the Petrocaribe arrangement be sustained with Venezuela in such dire straits?
Well, you tell me that they're in dire straits. That's one view. I know they have challenges, they have problems. You know, I'll tell you, my dear sister, when Chavez came to office, Venezuela had 100 years of oil, but had 80% poverty. Venezuelan society, to change it, and to change it by way of the democratic process, is very difficult, very challenging, because systems, presidential systems, parliamentary systems, in where you come to office through electoral means and you have institutionalized opposition in the parliament and various institutions of state, makes it very difficult to effect change, particularly in a country where you had the kind of history which we have had. And one of the things I often urge is that when these societies are in the process of change, 10, 15 years, but a moment in history, you have to look to see how that change is going to be made over a longer period of time.
Well, Dr. Gonsalves, that was under late President Chavez. The reality now is totally different. It's a different dynamics right now, because the economic challenges that we're hearing about now in Venezuela, certainly we didn't hear about them when President Chavez was there. That doesn't mean they weren't there in some sense, but what we're hearing now, things as basic as toilet paper short, rationing of goods, people have to be lining up to get into supermarkets to get basic supplies.
One of the things I've inquired about things like these, and I've lived long enough to know the people who hoard for political purposes to create difficulties. I've lived long enough to know that. I've seen it all over the world. Now, my brother Nicolas Maduro won the presidency by a narrow margin. So incidentally was George Bush winning over Al Gore, or for that matter Barack Obama.
No, his margin was big.
Barack Obama's margin in the first election. American presidential elections are determined 50-48%. If you have 50-48, that is seen in America as a victory between comfortable and a landslide, particularly if you win massively the electoral college votes, because you know
Right.
that system. But the popular vote is usually very, very narrow because the country is split down in the middle. The difference, of course, is that, save and except with Barack Obama, because there are some people who are just not satisfied that a black man is president in the United States, and they try every day to rerun the election. But when President Bush won by way of the Supreme Court in 2000, the most of the people in the country line up, they say, well, we're going to meet you 4 years down the road. And they accepted the presidency, and he did all sorts of things.
Yeah.
That is not happening. That is not happening in Venezuela.
No, the election.
So that the point is this: there are people who want to continue the war. In fact, it is.
So, Dr. Gonsalves, are you suggesting that the situations we're hearing about in Venezuela are really being caused by political elements who would go to this extent to destabilize the country?
No doubt in my mind. Absolutely no doubt in my mind. This doesn't mean that there are not pre-existing tensions in Venezuelan society. I just explained to you the backdrop. But for all you hear people talk, 80% of the media in Venezuela is in the hands of people opposed to the government, you know. That has been the case. This is the challenge which you have, as I say, in making a change in those circumstances. But it is not a new phenomenon. Right here I'm amazed here in Grenada. I shouldn't say in Grenada. I see on the internet. Keith Mitchell just win 15 seats. He's in office for 6 months. Whether he inherited a bad hand or not so bad hand or whatever it is, I see on the internet there are a number of sites dedicated to beating him down, saying, listen to me, what has happened? You haven't done A, you haven't done B, you haven't done C. I mean, it seemed to be a modern form in some of these countries.
You know what happens, Dr. Gonsalves? It is the divisive tear-down politics that we have created among ourselves because of the way we address our opponents, the way we speak of them, the way we treat them. It filters down throughout the entire country, and we have this division and this divisiveness
I have a different view.
Politics have caused.
Let me give you my view. What you have in these societies, I'm not talking about Jamaica, where from the 60s, through a particular process, that violence became embedded in the political system, particularly in some urban constituencies.
Garrisons.
Yes. In places like Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, I've been maintaining that we don't have the extent of divisiveness politically that we had in the past. What you have is an extraordinary amplification of divisiveness by people using talk show radio, using the internet, using the social media. I am satisfied that this is the case, because I know when I was a young man, teenager, going into my early 20s, there are people who will tell you, don't shop at that place because there's somewhere for Ebenezer Joshua. You go there, don't shop at that one, there's Milton Cato in St. Vincent. And the divisions were palpable. I find, frankly speaking, that what you do there, it's easy to amplify divisions.
But Dr. Gonsalves, I've read, I've read somewhere where you referred to your own system in St. Vincent as a snake pit.
Yes.
Snake pit of politics.
Yes, by these persons who are engaged. Look, the people who they say oppose one another, they living side by side, they helping one another with a cup of this, the children playing together and so on and so forth. But
how do you refer to it as a snake pit when you are the Prime Minister?
No. Because you have a number of persons who want to amplify legitimate political differences and to put them in a language which is so extreme, and they build it up, wind it up. And you know what the modern media is? The talk shows, the internet, social networking, a small group of people who, they may have an agenda.
But you're trying to say you're not a part of this?
I don't get involved in that kind of politics. I will speak robustly, I will speak openly, but I have absolutely no malice to any political personality in St. Vincent.
And you don't encourage this kind of divisiveness in any way?
I don't encourage it.
Not even at election time, campaigning time, when you're on the platform and...
At election time, I portray my product as a far superior product to your product so that people will vote for me. No, this is competitive politics.
So
that is not divisive politics. That is, once you keep it within rational bounds, reasonable bounds, it's the nature of political competition.
Well, Dr. Gonsalves, I thank you very, very much.
I thank you too.
For taking this time to sit and have this discussion on our program, Time to Talk. Enjoy the rest of your stay in Grenada. And I look forward to speaking with you again next time on reparations.
I would wish to talk to you on reparations. Thank you.